Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is part 2 of Dr. Marnie Foderaro.
Yeah.
And we just got so off topic. We were so excited and wrapped up in our conversation. And so today she is going to tell us more in depth about her spiritual experiences, right?
All right, super. Well, yes, and I think that it's an appropriate place to talk about STEs, which is spiritually transformative experiences, because they are very, very similar to NDEs, near-death experiences. And for those that do not know the difference, of course, when you have an NDE, you die from this physical plane here on Earth and go on to have various experiences. So many are very similar. With an STE, you don't have to flatline, but you do experience trauma of some sort most of the time. Probably not always, but most of the time there's some sort of trauma, which is kind of what we talked about in part 1. It could be a variety of different things. That is different and unique for each individual. But that trauma can put you in a state where you are open to experiencing spiritual experiences that transform you. And actually, it was a medical doctor and psychotherapist, Dr. Yvonne Kaysen, that coined the term STE. And she has gone on to do a lot of research and then review a lot of other people's research, including Dr. Eben Alexander, who you had on your show, Peggy. He's the Harvard neurosurgeon that died of meningitis, but had a complete near-death experience that altered the course of his life. And so it's definitely a researched phenomenon. But regarding my situation, I had a couple different STEs that were really, really transformative that happened in the beginning. And I talked about them in part 1. One of them was a dragonfly experience where I was just in a state of gratitude and peacefulness. And a dragonfly circled me, and then 5 dragonflies. And within a very, very short time, there were 50 to 100 dragonflies circling me. And everything was in slow motion. Everything was just like, I could see them approaching me. I could see the veins in the wings, the iridescent colors throughout the whole body, the different sizes, and the feeling that I got was that of, we are loved, I am loved, and I am being circled and supported. And like I had mentioned in part 1, at one point I was starting to kind of come back to this earthly realm, and I knew to pull out my cell phone to videotape this experience. And I was able to capture it on film, all these dragonflies. I had never heard of that before. But later on, I went on to have a number of other kind of dragonfly experiences. And in many cultures, dragonflies, are a symbol of transformation. And I think that I was going through a big life change. And I think that was, part of the reason why I believe God sent me these dragonflies. And I actually went on to, later on that year, I went skiing in Minnesota, in Taylor Falls, Minnesota, and was having a Thanksgiving that was unlike any other. I was for the first time without family. But I was still in a state of happiness and gratitude, and had a few dragonfly experiences, but didn't really put the pieces of the puzzle together. But that day on Thanksgiving, drove around to look for a winery to go to. I was amazed to find one that was open, and there was a winery called the Dancing Dragonfly. And it turns out the owner of that winery had the same experience, where they were in a state of gratitude, but circled with dragonflies. So that was one major, major experience. Another experience that I mentioned, and I won't go into so much detail because I did talk about it a lot in part one, is where I got messages and experiences through electronics, where I was at a nail salon looking at a TV screen, was captivated by a couple different infomercials, and the experience was the same, like with all my spiritually transformative experiences, where time stands still, or there's no time, or what I believed was hours or maybe even days was really minutes, just very short snippets of time. But that's not the experience I had. And luckily, Dr. Yvonne Kaysen and others that study this say that that's what happens to a lot of people, that there's just like the world kind of blurs out and you are focused in on the experience, but there's just no time. So anyway, those two experiences, I think, were ones that just opened up my mind and heart and soul to being more aware of these signs and synchronicities. I wouldn't ever look for them, but they would just sort of appear randomly when I did not expect it at all. And I learned that through my research and through the experiences I had, to pay attention to these signs and synchronicities, because what we might think are just coincidences are really not coincidences. They're synchronicities. They're orchestrated to get our attention, maybe to give us the knowledge that there's more to this life. And actually, if people are tuning into your amazing NDE TV podcast series, they know, because they've heard hundreds of accounts of people that have had an NDE, and I've listened to some of your shows where they are spiritually transformative experiences. So this is a phenomenon that really happens. Go ahead. You were going to say something?
Oh, have you watched the movie Dragonfly?
No, I haven't.
You have got to Google it and watch it. It's Kevin Costner. It's a good movie.
Okay.
It's fictional.
Okay, sounds good.
But it's about it touches on near-death experiences, after-death communication, spiritually. I mean, they don't have those words so much, but it's it's fictional, but it's an amazing movie. I'll send you a link to it.
I will. Okay, thank you. I will definitely check that out, and maybe other listeners can check that out. And actually, everything that is fiction has some grounded basis in reality, in actual experiences. Like, for example, I was so compelled by my experiences that actually started at a garage sale that I wrote a spiritual fiction called God Came to My Garage Sale. And even though it's a spiritual fiction, and there's some embellishments here and there for the story, and of course, everything didn't happen at a garage sale. Some of it were my accounts, my experiences, but some of it were experiences of the hundreds of other people that I have listened to. But a spiritual fiction, or even a movie, like you said, the Dragonfly movie, that's fictional, still has some very good messages, because there is some reality that you can extrapolate from that. And actually, my book was endorsed by James Redfield, who wrote the Celestine Prophecy. He is so well known for his fictional work, yet it's all based on actual experiences and, a desire to help bring awareness about spirituality to the masses, which he has done with the Celestine Prophecy and the 10th Insight and that type of thing. So
I've had
anyway,
several people get mad at me because I tell them the shack is fiction, and they get furious. No, it's not. Yeah.
Right. But you know what? It definitely, it is. It's got combinations of both, but there are, this had to come from someone's mind and most likely from some experiences. And, that has been a runaway bestseller for a good reason, because, now with your platform and with the IANS community, which stands for the International Association for Near-Death Studies, the SAI community with Dr. Yvonne Kaysen, the Spiritual Awakenings International, we are having these conversations. We are bringing it. We are finding our voices. No longer do we feel like, hey, someone's going to think we're crazy if we tell them what we experienced, because now there are so many other accounts that are similar that we are given the permission to share our experiences. And, people can make up their own minds about what they want to believe or not, but most everyone that has experienced something like trauma or like the spiritual effects that happen as a result, they're compelled to share their story. Even people that are not comfortable in front of a camera or an audience or something will be compelled to share their story, because we are given such messages, and the underlying message with everything is love, that we are all about love. Love is the highest vibration. And yes, on this earthly plane, we need to go through life lessons that we probably choose before we even come here. There's definitely so much heartache and loss in our world. And we see it every day if we turn on the news, but we see it within our own families and our own lives. And it's hard to understand, why would we go through such deep and awful, painful emotions and experiences? But I truly believe that we do that. We go through that because we are trying to self-actualize and get to our highest awareness, and realizing that this is all part of the plan. And in talking about our experiences, we can open the minds of others to look back on their life or look ahead when they experience things and realize, hey, this might be synchronistic. This might be spiritual in nature. Let me stop and reflect on that. And that is what I did. And I actually, and we mentioned this in part one, I have an atheist background. So I never had exposure to God or organized religion or spirituality. I really didn't. And I didn't know any better. When you're raised a certain way, it just wasn't part of our, conversations. But in my heart of hearts, I knew that that there was more. I needed to look into these things myself and be on my own journey, even if it doesn't align with other family members that have different beliefs. So anyway, it's pretty amazing once you are awakened to, seeing that some things are not just coincidences. It's a pretty amazing thing. And it brings so much joy and peace to know that, there is another realm, and there is a purpose to all of this. So some of my other experiences, I've had so many, but I will tell you, even though they're random, like I'm going to be sharing some different random experiences, the common thread for me anyway, is that everything stood still with time. So there was always the feeling that, the air was like clear jello, that I just was sort of mesmerized. It's like all of my experiences were when I was in this deep kind of a dreamlike state, always with the feelings of love and gratitude. And so that is the common thread. But like, for example, another experience I had, there was a time, my whole life, I always wanted to be a mom. And there was a time that, I was having difficulty getting pregnant. And I just, those of you that are mothers or fathers that really want to be parents, you know this feeling. You really, you kind of get a tunnel vision. This is, you want to start a family, have a family. So I decided to pray, even though I wasn't particularly even involved in the organized church at that time. I decided to look into, would there be a saint out there that I could pray to for getting pregnant? And I found that Saint Gerard was the patron saint of mothers. And so I decided to pray to Saint Gerard one morning. I just said, gosh, I've tried a lot of other things and I just want to pray. I want my pregnancy test to come back positive and I want to have this, child. And so I was really focused on that morning and, didn't really think too much of it. I got in my car and I just drove to the, not too far, just a few blocks away, to the local kind of business area in my town. And I don't remember exactly what I was going for, whether I was going to go get a cup of coffee or I know I wasn't meeting anyone. I was by myself. But anyway, I turned on this road that I did not normally go on. It was behind some stores. And it was very quiet. It was really early in the morning. There were no cars out. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there was a red Corvette that cut me off right in the front. And in my spiritual fiction, in my book, I do write about this. I call it a yellow Corvette, but it was a red Corvette. And it really caught my attention, but everything was in slow motion. And I obviously put my foot on the brakes because I did not hit this car that came out of nowhere on this quiet morning where there were no cars out. And I could see that I knew it was a speeding car. It all happened very fast, but to me, it was slow motion. And I looked at the license plate and in bold capital letters, it said Gerard, which is the name of the patron saint that I was praying to. And that really shocked me for a lot of reasons. First of all, if this car was going so fast, how could I have even seen a license plate? But I do remember the feeling of just slow motion, almost as if I was not in my body, or as if I was not in my mind, or I was not in, I was at a different plane, a different level to our world. So anyway, that was one of the many experiences it was crazy. And actually that evening, I had bought a pregnancy test and you have to do that in the morning. And that next morning I found out I was pregnant. And so I kind of, was trying to make sense of it. This is before I did a lot of research into, this really happened. This really is something that could happen. But I was trying to make sense of the experience. And I thought, wow, isn't that neat? Maybe my prayers were answered, but I didn't fully believe it. And it wasn't until after about 30 different experiences that I finally went, something's happening here. I'm getting messages. I'm manifesting some things. I am experiencing things. Another experience I had that all happened within a 5-minute period. I was thinking about an uncle that had passed away who had a very different first name, very unique first name. And you wouldn't see this name, places. It was just very different. He was much older. And within a 5-minute period, and I'm driving, I saw a license plate with that name. I saw a street sign with that name. I saw a billboard, an actual billboard where I think it was advertising, like a realtor or something with that name. And there was one other thing. I've just got to try to think of it because I just, this is so overwhelming to just really remember. It's almost like when I mention these things, I'm taken back. I feel myself in the car right now, seeing these things. But within a short time of thinking of this uncle and his name, to see that name 3 times just seemed like just too coincidental. Just be like, especially when you never see it. And I drove by that area because that's where I would go to work. And I don't remember seeing that billboard ever again, or that street sign ever again. And I kind of looked for it, but it was not there. So that's a little bit like, okay, and it makes you wonder, am I imagining this? But I know I didn't. I know I didn't imagine this. And actually the research that's out there regarding these experiences, they actually say you are not imagining. This is not, you're not hallucinating. You're not making this up. You really experience these things. Another experience I had that was kind of otherworldly was a dream visitation from my mom. And I had heard at that point, I think I had done some more research. I was planning to spend a month in India, and I was actually meeting up the beginning of the trip. Normally, tourists go from New Delhi at the top all the way down. I started in Mumbai, which is the old Bombay, and I went up to Udaipur, Jaipur, up to New Delhi on my travels, because I was meeting for, I think it was 4 days with a man who was in his 90s that almost married my mother. And my mother went to do her graduate work. And my mother had passed away at this point. I couldn't talk to her about all of this, but I knew of this man. I knew of this relationship. She in North Carolina got her master's degree with this man who came from India. That was her first love, probably her only love, even though she went on to marry my dad. They had a really big connection. And I remember meeting this man when I was young. I probably would have been about 6 or 7 years old when he came to the States. I'm from the Midwest like you are. I'm from the Chicago suburbs. And, he came to visit. So I do remember meeting him even as a little kid. And I remember at one point, my mom gave me the sari, and the sari is that big piece of cloth that, the women of India wear as their dress, not even dressing up, just every day. They wear a variation of a sari. And this particular sari was laced in gold. And I remember my mom saying to me, this is very special. Always save it. But at one point at this garage sale, I put it out to be sold, just like a lot of other heirlooms and, things. I just was, I had to get rid of things. But at one point when someone did want to buy it, I remembered my mom, saying how special this sari was. And so I kept it. And then it wasn't too much later on that or around that time, that even though my parents were divorced, my father had saved all my mom's love letters from this man in India. And they were all beautiful love letters, not only with what they said, but that they were the old onion skin par avian letter paper that, you would actually, they were pre-stamped, and you would write your letter and you would fold it and seal it. Those were the kind of letters that they had back then. And so I really had kind of a spiritual experience finding those letters. I didn't know I had them. They were, when I had to leave my home, I went through the crawl space and found a box with my name on it. I know it had my dad's handwriting, and, on the cover of the box. And I went through and it was all these love letters. And I sought out to try to connect with this man. And it took a while, but eventually through some miracles, actually, I'll share this because it's actually kind of another kind of miracle. I connected with his daughter who was living in New York, and she was my age. And she was very kind, but she's basically like, why do you want to contact my dad? I said, well, my mom passed away and I found these letters and I just wanted to, connect. I met your dad, when I was a little kid. And so she was kind of a little leery about that, but she ended up giving me his email, and I wrote a long email to him and sent it off. So I was doing all this through modern day electronics, even connecting with that daughter and then trying to connect with the man. Well, I printed out that email and I thought, I'm going to just put it in snail mail as well. And it turned out he never got the email, even though that was his correct email address, because we emailed at one point. But he did get the snail mail and ended up mailing me lots of photographs. And then we, in time made arrangements for me to go to India to see him. So anyway, that was pretty awesome. But right before the trip, I had a dream visitation from my mom. And I heard of dream visitations before, didn't really believe them, to be honest with you. People would say, yeah, I saw my grandmother at the end of my bed, or usually it's at the end of your bed. I mean, you hear these. And I was like, until I actually experienced it and saw my mom at the end of my bed, I would never have believed it. Okay. And I'm sure there's some people out there that have either had near-death experiences or spiritually transformative experiences or encounters where they have seen someone at the end of their bed. Well, actually, my mom was lying on my bed and she was looking at me, and she wasn't smiling or frowning. There was no real emotion to her face. Her face was beautiful. She was, I never saw a photograph of her at this, what I saw. She was probably in her 30s. I'm just guessing. And actually, a lot of research says that when people do come to visit you, they can choose what they want to look like. Like if they were physically dying and had their body was falling apart or whatever, they can kind of choose to come back at a time when they were healthier. And that's what you see. You don't see the person that is, physically falling apart. So I saw my beautiful mother, and, I saw her in particular clothes. And I was just mesmerized, and we just looked at each other, and there were no words spoken. She didn't speak to me. And if I was not in a dream state, if I had my regular consciousness, I would have a million questions to ask her, because she had since passed away. I would want to ask her, Mom, is there really a heaven? Is there really a God? Are there angels? Are you okay? What's this whole earth about? Am I having these experiences for a reason? But of course, I didn't think to ask one question. And so I just looked at her, but the feeling I had, oh my God, Peggy, and with all of these experiences, the feeling is just, I'm being surrounded with love and light, and that it's all going to be okay. I'm like reassured somehow. And then at some point, her vision, the vision of her just dissipated, And with many, this is another thing I'd like to mention, sometimes people say, well, why didn't you talk about it right away? There are people that are talking about their near-death experiences 10, 20 years after the fact, because it's almost like it takes a long earthly time to be able to assimilate this all, to just figure it all out, to have it be part of who we are, to be able to talk about it. But many of the near-death experiences that I listen to, and so many, I would say the majority of them are just so very convincing because of the people and how they're able to articulate what they went through. I just re-listened to Dr. Mary Neal's near-death experience. She was an osteopath doctor, orthopedic. I knew it was an O word. She was an orthopedic doctor, very grounded in science, needing proof for everything. Well, she went on a kayaking adventure, vacation or whatever. And at the end of a waterfall or whatever, she was pinned. And for over 30 minutes, she was without any kind of oxygen. And she explains how she was able to view her body from above, and she could see people working on her, pulling her out of the water, and she was purple or blue. She was not in good shape at all, of course, after 30 minutes being pinned. And she was in a remote area where there was, no help, no communications, no cell towers, nothing like that. Somehow, and I don't know the exact story, but somehow she was able to get medical attention, and then she went on to live through this experience. And now she speaks. She did a TED Talk, but she's on so many different channels talking about her near-death experience, which actually happened years prior. So another common thread is it takes a while for people to really be able to talk about their experiences. I think even you mentioned something about at one point, you remember something when you were 5 years old. Well, but you didn't talk about it when you were 5 or 6 or 7 or 8. You end up having life experiences, and then you have some other kind of traumatic event that kind of puts you back into a spiritual awakening. And then you could go back and say, hey, I had that experience when I was a little kid. Do you find that
stuff's buried?
Yeah. And why do you think that is? I've always been curious. Why do you think our consciousness buries it?
I've asked myself, because after I was 25 and lost the twins, and I was sitting up, I went outside, get away from everybody. I was mourning the twins. I was sad and alone because nobody in this big Catholic family, they had a big party inside. I just went outside to be alone because none of them could say, I'm sorry you lost the twins. And I had a miscarriage right after that too. And nobody could say anything. They still treated me just as bad, ignored me just like they always had. They never wanted me in the family because I come from a bad home. Okay, they weren't angels. They're, because they were Catholic, they had a reputation, but my ex's father-in-law, he was very abusive to his wife. And one of the babies would have been about my age if she had lived. The kids had told me he knocked that baby out of her. He beat her, and she went up against the wall. And when she hit the wall, she slid down, and they said it left a trail of blood. And she went to the hospital, come home in a shoebox, and they named her Loretta. They weren't perfect. They were very, very poor. And the mother was mentally ill, severely. She was in and out of mental hospitals. And the poor woman, 13 children she bare, then one died. And he just kept abusing her. And so they weren't perfect, but yet I wasn't allowed in their family. They wasn't going to accept me because I come from a bad home, because I had, had friends that in high school that were Black and things. But anyway, so they just mistreated me. But a lot of it was the sister-in-laws were jealous of me.
Sure.
I was very thin from starvation through my childhood. And I had this really long brown hair, and I was just very feminine, very shy and quiet. And I was just like,
and you're so very, you're so very beautiful, Peggy. I mean, now I can imagine when you were that young too, that you were so very beautiful. So there could have been some envy.
Yeah. The
But I
women
would like
just
to,
didn't
I would
want
like
me
to say
around.
though, you had mentioned that mother was mentally ill, but you know what? She might have been gaslit to believe she was mentally ill. She might have been extremely capable,
Well,
and
most of her siblings were too. And they said her
but
mother was severely mentally ill. So this was something very
right,
prominent, hereditary in the family. But so anyway, that I was just up, sad and alone. So I went outside,
right,
sat in the night sky and looked up at the stars, and I was just kind of praying, saying, God, I give up. If they can't, if they can't care about their nieces and nephews that died,
right.
there's no way they're going to ever care about me. And I gave up
Sure.
and I just got lost in the stars. And all of a sudden, I had the memory of the drowning from front to back. But there you go. I got lost in the stars. I went into that timelessness that
Right.
we're talking about.
And you buried, so I can see where, to come full circle from what we started to talk about, that you bury these thoughts and experiences, for many reasons, and they could be extremely painful. But like you said, you had a spiritual experience as
Yeah, I
well
can
when you
see it
were,
now as an awakening. Of course, I
yeah,
didn't know that at the time, because when it took me over and I looked, and it's like this whole movie trailer, was in the sky. It just
right,
took me over. I was in it. It was like I was reliving. And then I was like sat up and I was like, did I drown when I was little? And so I
right.
went and visited my family. Did I drown when I was little? I was like, yeah, you did. And this is why we never talked about it,
Wow.
and etc. And I remember later bits and pieces, and it took a while to all come back to me. But I remembered this, right after the drowning. I
Right.
remembered it a few days after the wildflower incident. Was probably a few days after the drowning. And then there was spiritual things that happened, and they would come back in flashbacks. And I thought, what in the world? What kind of weird memory is this? What do
Right.
I do with it? I can't talk to anybody about this. And they just kept coming back, kept coming back. And then after the twins and I lost had the miscarriages, I decided I was going to college. And then after college, I became a child abuse investigator. And my first month there, I started just saving lives. Okay, well, I did right after the drowning too. I would be led, like I just would have these feelings, and I would be led to someone that was, choking in this house, or this car wreck up the hill that you couldn't even hear a noise from. Or
Wow. So really, really, Peggy, I'm so glad you're sharing this, because it's so important to see how spirit works, because your experiences that you had as a child, I'm sure led you on this path to even being more open to having spiritual experiences, but also the work that you chose to do, and that how I'm sure your intuition that you said would lead you to certain people or scenarios or cases. I'm sure you call them cases when you're working. You probably were, that was a big part of why you're here on earth. And you probably saved so many people's lives from your experience that you had, but then how it evolved into what, you are your life's work. And then just to even, go so far as to write your books. I remember even seeing you on Dr. Oz, where, you were interviewed and talking about this. And that was back when it still was a little taboo to talk about this stuff. You still are kind of judged. And, I find myself too, that if there are people that I can kind of figure out are not spiritual at all, I don't gravitate towards those people anymore, because not that I need to share my story, and I don't. There's a lot of people that don't know my spiritual experiences, and that's part of the reason why I wrote this book. But I just think that at some point we have to take care of ourselves and release the people that are judgmental or questioning. I mean, questioning is not a bad thing, but if they do it with compassion and understanding, that's a whole different thing. But I think that the older we get, and then if there are more and more experiences that we have or hear other people's experiences, we become a little stronger in our own truth, in our own faith, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's just almost as I get older and I look back and put all the pieces together and see where I was pushed out of something and I would resist. I'm trying to fit in. I'm trying to fit in. Like my first husband's family, 16 years trying to fit in. My family, like you grew up with, trying to fit in. And excuse me, and jobs I've had trying to fit in. And it's just like you're going against the current. And it just wants you to push you on down somewhere else. And you're just fighting, trying to, go with the current. And you're like, you are not meant to go in this direction. And you will not. And as I get older, it almost now seems like, I'm just using my imagination here, but it feels like, maybe before we're born, we are all given this song with the musical notes. Because as I get older, when I look back at all the memories and the turns, it feels like this violin. I know it sounds silly, but it feels like this violin just playing this song. I think of the song or the movie Thornbirds, where they say, at the beginning that something about this bird is just meant his whole life to go to this one, I don't know, I guess it's a flower, but when it gets there, it pierces its heart and kills it, but it gives the most beautiful song as it's dying, this song. And that was kind of the whole gist of the whole series of Thornbirds, is that at the end of it, she has spent her whole life loving this priest. And she just was after that love and after that. I'm getting way off topic.
No, but it makes
my mind
sense.
goes in a million places.
But when you finally get to what you think is what you want, it's not necessarily what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was pushing against something her whole life she wasn't meant to have. And she would never let go of it. But you mentioned ions. That was just one more thing. I was not meant to be there. And I started a group down here in Southeast Ohio. There's never any NDE group down here before. I thought I was doing a good thing. And then the longest running IONS group was 40 years, and Lady had it in Columbus, Ohio. And she retired, and I went up there and I took over her group for anybody that wanted to continue on, because someone wanted to separate and go to metaphysical instead. And then COVID hit. And so I had I was in the first group of ISGO to start the ISGO trainings. And I had 3 months of people scheduled, Raymond Moody and all these, top people. And I was just like in it. Right. And then they come and told me, oh, they don't want you here.
Wow.
We don't want Christians.
You know what? But, maybe
I wasn't meant to be there. I was meant to be right here.
Yes, you're meant to be right here, and you're making a difference with so many people. And it's, these conversations are so important to have, because it's wonderful just to hear someone's near-death experience and what they experienced, but understanding the backstory or understanding some of the other kinds of connections are just key. They're very important to get a complete picture of things.
And these things aren't new. People might think, oh, that's new age garbage. These things would happen to your grandma. People talk to their grandparents and say, have you heard any stories in your family of this and this and this? I guarantee you they would tell you something.
Right. And, but also the previous generations did a lot of no talking. They did a lot of silencing. Like, I had an aunt who lost a child to drowning too. He was 13, my cousin. And indirectly, I take his story and write about that in the book as well. But she was told by her mother, never think about him again and never talk about it. And so that's how she handled her grief and her loss. Thank God we live in a time now where we can have these conversations, because, you know, people's emotional health is much more important than, you know, that could have detrimental effects if you don't get it out of yourself and talk about it.
Yeah. And a few
and
months
that's
after my NDE, I told my husband at the time,
yeah.
and he said, it's as crazy it sounds. He says, I believe you. He says, I know you. I can tell you're telling me the truth.
Yeah.
And I told my sister, and she looked at me weird. And it was strange because she's always been this liar and tells these big whopping stories. And I'm telling the truth about something. She can't even go there. Like what?
Right,
all of a sudden I became you. All of a sudden I became the liar and making up stuff. No,
Right.
you know, like, and then I told another friend of ours and they looked at me weird. And so I left it there for years.
Yeah. Right. And that's
not
kind
until
of what,
I met my husband.
right.
Let's
Right.
see.
That's a
Let's see,
lot
it
of
was
what
10
happened.
years later.
Yeah.
It was 10 years.
So there you see how you can go many years without, you know, expressing it, because of not only was it traumatic, but you were not encouraged to talk about it.
Yeah.
So,
And
so
actually,
just really, go
what
ahead.
made me bring it up with him is we had our adopted kids. So it was a couple years after our marriage. And I had some time alone, which I never did. And I was up in my room doing some spring cleaning, and I was fooling with the radio. And I hadn't listened to Christian music in years, because I remember Christian music to be like square, you know, the old fashioned stuff. And other than Amazing Grace, or, you know, you'd hear some hymns at Catholic church. They didn't really get into music like my old churches did. But I longed for that music ever since my NDE, actually. And so I flip around the stations, and I come to one, and I didn't know they had a new thing, this new pop Christian music. I hadn't heard it. And when I started hearing that,
Amy Grant was the big crossover from, you know, the religious music, the church music, to the pop music. And that opened up the door for so many people to listen to Christian music. Even as an atheist, I would listen to Christian music because I loved it so much. I love the message. I love the beat, everything. So anyway, so you're playing with the radio and you hear some Christian music.
It was just like somebody lit a match in my heart. Yeah, I mean, I was like on fire, you know, I was like rejoicing, and all this stuff, spiritual stuff started coming back to me, my memories, and just like I had it buried. It was like I had just found it underneath the bed or something. I mean, it was just like all of a sudden it was there. And I ran down, got my 9 adopted kids, and I said, kids, come here. And they sat around the bed, around the room. And it's the first time I got like I am right now, like animated. Wonderful. And spiritual. Wonderful. And I'm telling them all these things, and tears run down my face. And they're like, Mom, they never see me like
I have to ask though, Pegi,
like that.
You said this very fast, and I have to ask, did you say 9 adopted kids?
Yeah.
9 adopted kids. Wow.
When my husband now, when we got married, I'd always done foster care. And so I got him into foster care, and he knew I wanted to adopt. That's basically why we got married, because I wanted to adopt, and you should be married. Sure. And so we adopted a sibling group of 5 our first year of marriage.
Oh my God.
And we continued doing foster care, and a sibling group of 4 we were fostering for a year. They became available. That's how we ended up with 9. We didn't do it intentionally.
Wow.
And so these beautiful kids are just like, Mom, you know, they later turn into devils when they hit puberty. But
you know what, Pegi, talking about, you know, your experience, and I'd like to share at least one more experience that I had. You know, you had a transformation that came through the radio that, you know, the timing, the music, the genre, whatever it was life-changing for you. I also had some other experience, like I did talk about in part 1 about, you know, spirit coming through a television set. But I have also heard that you can get messages from the other side through electronics. And there was a woman that I knew, we had, her boyfriend was a mutual friend, and he had passed away. And I remember she said that she heard once that you could, if you put a tape recorder, back in the old days, you know, the tape cassette, if you put a blank tape going on at night, and so it would have to be several hours long of a tape, that you could hear messages through that if you, I'm sure it'd be kind of boring in many ways to re-listen to that while you were sleeping, but she swears that she was able to hear her boyfriend, who had recently passed away, come to her through that tape recorder. And I was one of the few that actually believed her. So many people she wouldn't even talk to about it because it sounded so far-fetched. But, maybe there's others in your audience that have had that experience. But, one other experience I'd like to share that's, I thought coincidental, but now I really don't believe it is. I was going to meet my brother at one point. We were going to have lunch together, and we were going to talk about my mom, like that was on our agenda, to talk about our mom, who had passed away many years prior. And so I'm driving to this restaurant, and right before I get to the restaurant, I said, Mom, I'm here, we're going to be thinking about you, and it would be amazing if you could give me some sort of sign that we love you and that we are thinking of you. And so I'm still driving to the restaurant. I'm about 5 minutes away. All of a sudden, her favorite song came on the radio, and I know her favorite music. She had given me all her records, her LPs, and God, they were all stamped, I remember, with her name on it. Anyway, this favorite song came on the radio. And when I was listening to this particular radio station, it did not play oldies and goodies. It was all current music. So the song really was out of place with the other music that was there. And, and I since went back and looked at that, listened to that radio station, just sort of checked it out. And they never played these older songs that, I know that she knows where it was her music, but that she exposed me to. And I sat in that restaurant parking lot for at least another 15, 20 minutes while I'm sure my brother was waiting in the restaurant. But there was another song that came on that was her music, and another and another. And I believe there were 4 songs total that were her music. And then I was thinking to myself, now, how long are songs? I don't know. That's how long I kind of sat in the car. But it was all slow motion, and that was before I had the slow motion other experiences that I could connect the dots. And then I felt myself kind of coming back to earth. Okay. So it's kind of like the focus when I was in this zone was clear. It's almost like the earthly focus wasn't even as clear as the spiritual focus. But so I was coming back into focus, even though it was not as clear. It's hard to describe that. But, and then they went back to just playing the regular music that they normally play. So I really believe, after, all the research I've done and going back and thinking about these experiences and writing about them, because that really helps, the writing has really helped me. I really believe that was just for me. Just like that experience that I talked about where my late friend in her hometown and her close friend came through that television set at that nail salon when I had that experience. It's almost like it was just meant for me. It wasn't meant for, I bet other people listening to the radio heard the regular songs that this radio station would play. So anyway, that's just another experience where, I don't know. I just think, and there are many others. I mean, I feel like, Peggy, we could just talk and talk and talk and share stories like all day long. And you do get animated, you do get kind of emotional and excited in a way talking about this, because it almost puts you back into the time when you were experiencing these things. But the message that I would like to kind of end with here is that we all are given, I believe, signs and synchronicities, but we don't always pay attention to them, and we aren't always in a state in our lives where we can pay attention to them. I was going along life for a long time without much thought about spirituality. Sure, a little bit here and there. I always was questioning, is there a God? Is there something more to this earth? But then, life would get busy and you just move on and you just don't really focus on it until you're forced to focus on it. And so what I would say thank you to your audience for sticking this out. I know we had a first part interview that we really focused a lot on the trauma that led up to the spiritual experiences, and everyone's trauma is different. My trauma involved domestic violence and losing adult children to parental alienation. That was huge trauma for me. Other people might have trauma that's huge for them. They might have lost a job. They might have lost a loved one. They might have had to move to a place that they didn't want to move to. I mean, who knows? People's trauma is all different, but the common thread is that usually it's a traumatic situation that prompts a spiritual transformative experience. And definitely death, flatlining is a traumatic experience when you're in a car accident, or you have an operation that went bad, or a drowning, or whatever the different experience where you lost a heartbeat or brain activity or whatever, but then we're able to come back to life to recount your experiences. That was all based in trauma. So, part one, we really did, talk a lot about the trauma, and trauma is real, and we all have trauma. We all have negative experiences. And I think it's good that, we understand that can be a catalyst to a positive awakening. So I would just encourage other people to continue listening to your NDE TV and different people's accounts. Try to get people's backstory or additional information to make it, more personable, so you can understand the context that their story, their situation was in.
Yeah. And
but also just
some people have said, I don't want to hear their story. I just want to hear the near-death experience. And I was like, you're not learning compassion. If you're not coming on at least my podcast and you're not learning compassion, then, maybe a different podcast is better for you.
Right. And it's not just the compassion, although that is a very good point. And it really is a reflection on anyone that would make a comment like that. It's really a reflection on how shallow of an individual they are, that they have not evolved to the level that you have evolved to. So, we have compassion for those that are misguided, but that doesn't mean we need to put up with, being treated and have negative things said. But no, the reality is it's not just the NDE or the STE. It's important to look at the entire package. Like, for example, when I needed validation, I needed proof. I really believed, and I don't necessarily now, I believe anyone can have experiences and it doesn't matter what their background is, but to be able to hear Dr. Mary Neal or Dr. Yvonne Kaysen or Dr. Raymond Moody or Dr. Eben Alexander, these people, now I don't necessarily have that same kind of, looking at doctors as all knowing and everything, especially after the last couple of years with a lot of dishonest information, fraudulent information regarding medical stuff. But I needed the proof that these experiences existed. And for these previously atheist, most of them scientific people that were researchers, for them to experience these things and to go on to have experiences and to go on and talk about it, write books, speak about it. That was extremely compelling. And if I only had paid attention to their near-death experience, but didn't look at the big picture of it all, didn't look at their background or their, what frame of mind they were coming at, or what were some things that led up to this, or what were some results that happened afterwards, I don't think, you get deeper into the real understanding that is necessary for these.
Yeah. And I've had quite a few doctors on the podcast, and I have everybody on,
Sure.
So, because I didn't want people to feel, because I feel like IANS just kind of presents, they have to have initial behind their name before they're a main speaker. And I'm thinking, that's not what people want to hear. They care about the story.
Right.
And your janitor, your babysitter, your whoever may have had such an amazing experience and such a life around that experience that, I'm feeling like, let's give more people chances. Because I think, the same people they put on there every year.
Right,
and they're thinking that, they got this title behind their name and that's giving them credibility and an esteem. I'm like, but what about the audience? What do they want to hear?
Right. And actually there's positives and negatives to both. I mean, because like I said, I'm a personal, I've gone on in my education and all of that, and I found value in that only because it allowed me to do a career that I wanted to do. But I also believe that degrees and letters after your name and all that it's all overrated. We are all human beings. We are all spiritual beings. And just because one person chooses one path and another the other, they are not, one is not better than the other.
It's almost, I think, has become a divide, as in liberal is educated and Christian is not. So if they get all these letters and then they're talking about spiritual things and maybe reincarnation thrown in there, all these other things, and these new age things, and then they can look down on Christians and look down on Republicans and say, now they're the dummies, they're the Appalachian, they're the West Virginians, they're the, because there is that.
Right, there definitely is. But I will say, and I know from what you said, your experience with IANS wasn't necessarily so positive, even though I did not, well, right, that I was just trying to be nice. But even though I didn't have a scientific background, I spoke at IANS, and they found value in what I had to say, which was nice. But I also, I've listened to many different people speak at IANS, and I was also going to the Chicago IANS, but so much is online. You can catch, all these different big cities. But one very compelling near-death experience I heard was about a woman with no letters behind her name, no big titles. She was struck by lightning 2 times, and both times had a near-death experience. And she also was someone that was totally not comfortable talking in front of people.
What was that last part?
She was totally not comfortable speaking in front of people. And so she ended up coming on the IANS circuit, where she would talk about being hit by lightning and having 2 near-death experiences. But she also had a friend and a mentor come with her that would give her kind of emotional support to be able to do this, because she was not anyone that would feel comfortable in front of a camera, an audience, or anything like that. Yet she was so moved by her life-altering experiences that she needed to talk about it. And so IANS gave her a platform, even though she was like, I don't want to say a nobody, because everybody is somebody, but she didn't have the degrees or the credibility, that was just given which shouldn't necessarily be given just because of someone's title.
Yeah. I
But
was
that
interested
one
in
of-
assist there a few years ago. And at that time, I was getting to be friends with the people in charge. And then they was inviting me, wanted me to come. And then I mentioned about speaking about my NDEs and, well, do you have a master's degree? I'm like, no, I didn't finish that. Well, you have to have at least a master's degree to be a speaker.
You have a doctorate degree and postdoctorate degree in being a wonderful mother to so many children, and also just to be able to have a platform like you do and everything that it takes a very special person to devote time and energy to do this. So,
and I love doing this. I am so glad now that everything happened the way it did, that I did not waste my time and energy, expertise, talent, whatever in that. I'm glad that I am doing it here for me in my home in Long Bottom, Ohio. I mean, it brings me so much joy. I wanted to say something. When you were talking earlier, I think it's about like being in near misses with vehicle accidents and kind of like lose this time and stuff. I wrote down spiritual airbags. And I just kind of named it because there are so many people, and I have too, those experiences where, how did I just not get hit?
Right.
It's impossible that I did not have any impact. And I had two of those in the almost exact same spot, if not the same spot, on a road not far from my house, within 2 years of each other, almost exact same spot on the road. The first time was with my husband at night before Christmas. And then the next time it was a beautiful sunny day and I sat into town. It was almost, it was 11:11. As soon as it passed, I didn't get hit. I looked at the clock. It said 11:11.
11:11. There you go. I see that all the time, and that is definitely a sign. Yeah.
And it's like, and I just wrote down, I said, spiritual airbags. It's just like,
you know what?
There's something that protects us. It comes in. It's like, this isn't happening to you today.
Some people say that, and even though I know our time is up here, let me just briefly share one more experience, and I'll just be brief about it, but it goes along with the spiritual airbags. My son had his driving permit, and he was coming home from either baseball or a karate class or something like that in a very remote area, remote time where there were no cars. And I thought that's a good opportunity to let him take the wheel, and because he was trying to get his, he was on his way to getting his driver's license. Well, and he even remembers this too. We've talked about it since then, but we were crossing the road. He was driving, no cars anywhere. It was just a beautiful country, quiet area, but it was kind of hilly. So you couldn't necessarily see a whole lot, either way. Enough, you would definitely see a car, All of a sudden, out of nowhere, there was an 18-wheeler barreling down the road. And my son is driving and I'm in the passenger seat, and I'm sure I said something, but I can't really remember. And he doesn't remember. But this 18-wheeler was coming so fast that I knew we were not going to make it. And right before impact, the car jolted forward, completely jolted forward. Like maybe that was our spiritual airbag. And we did not get hit. And I remember thinking, oh my God, that was so close. Like, how did we not get hit? That was just out of the blue. And he was driving, and I asked him if he had put his foot on the gas to go. And he said he didn't, because he's just learning to navigate all that. And so I only had one, but I guess if I really think back, there are probably a number of different times where there were just near misses, but someone, whether it's a guardian angel or whether it's God or Christ or, one of our spirit guides, who knows, is looking out for us. And so, what you experienced with that. And I too experienced just there's just no way we would have made it. That would have been a complete impact. So it's amazing.
And that's what we're talking about, whether it's people that identify with New Age or those identify with the Christian. We're talking about that exact same thing, that knowledge, that wisdom that exists out here in the air around us, and is always protecting us and watching out for us and giving us insight, giving us these ultra real experiences that guides us to where we're supposed to go during near-death experiences. Everybody's hearing say, everybody's experiencing this. And no matter what you say it is, it is. Whether you call it this or you call it that, the fact that it is that it exists. And that's why I do the podcast. Because to discuss that, be aware of this.
Right, be aware. That's what I was going to say. Yeah, we need to be aware and keep our eyes open, but our hearts and mind open to that reality. And I believe it's a reality. And I'll tell you, I was one of those extremely skeptical people, especially not just because of my atheist background, but I just needed proof to, is this real? And you know, you lose people along the way that don't align with your same values when it comes to all sorts of things. But
and
that's an okay
because,
thing.
You know, and if anybody wants to know why I stopped the comments, we all need to stay in gratitude.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, we all need to stay in gratitude. We all need to avoid negativity. And I love and appreciate the 95% of the people that tell me every day how much they love this channel and they love me and they love the guests and how this helped them. And I love that. But
and you know what?
5% it's probably negativity.
It's probably more than 95%. I think that you probably have 99%. And, you know, like we said before, you know, if you chose to stop comments or whatever, not only will that free you up more, it will let people just stay in gratitude. And you're always going to have disgruntled people that complain.
Yeah, and I don't want us to alter what we say because we know what the haters are going to say. They're not saying anything now. They told me to shut up for the last time because I just shut them up when I turned off the comments. We don't have to worry in back of our mind, oh, they're going to say this or that's off the table. We are all freer now.
Good, wonderful. And just realize people that are compelled to be critical constantly, if they're doing it to you and they don't even know you personally, just imagine the people they surround themselves, the negativity and you know, just terrible vibe that they are bringing to other people. And hopefully those people will have an experience like we talk about. If they're tuning in, maybe they have had a near-death experience, but chances are they haven't. Maybe they want to, because after near-death experiences and spiritual transformative experiences, your life is forever changed. And you do live in positivity and gratitude and love. Even if you did before, you do even more so after experiencing things.
I'm 61 and done.
Yeah, right.
You know,
well, you're awesome.
I put up with all the hate. I'm going to.
You don't need to. And done. And like we said, it's important, not just the near-death experience or STE, it's the entire experience and understanding, you know, what happened before and after, that really kind of makes the experience much more real and understandable. So anyway, Peggy, thank you so much for having me on your show again for part 2. And you know, I just think you are amazing. And I admire you even more so now, knowing that you have adopted 9 children. I just want to cry. That's just so beautiful that you and your husband have made the difference in the lives of so many people. So not only personally, but also with this amazing channel that's just going to get better and better and better.
I'm celebrating 1 million views today. I just made it to 1 million views. And I think it's pretty
Wow.
good for your first year of the channel. I think it is.
Definitely, definitely. You are awesome. You are awesome. And it's so cool to see you, because I followed you before. I like back in the early days when you were just finding your voice. So to see you come kind of full circle here, and it's only getting better. So thank you so much for
Thank
letting
you.
me be a part of that. Yeah.
Good luck to you.
Okay, take care. So nice to see you. I'll be following you for much longer too. So keep it up. You do wonderful work.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care. Bye.